Hello, my name is Andy Lucas, and I'm a middle school math teacher in the Upper St. Clair School District in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I work with 7th graders, and I've been a middle school teacher for the last 11 years. About 8 years ago, I started this journey toward customizing instruction, and it's been in the last 3 or 4 that I've been able to really hone in on this whole idea of customizing instruction for my students and providing them with the best possible instruction I can give them, the best possible support I can give them. In this video, I'd like to share with you a couple of the strategies that I've come across during that journey.
Before we get into some of those practical strategies, it would be best if I shared some of the philosophy that is kind of the underpinnings of my classroom. For starters, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the whole idea of the 10,000 hour rule made popular by Malcolm Gladwell. One of the 4 core pillars of my class is the idea of deliberate practice that is made popular by Anders Ericsson. Specifically, Ericsson says that it's not just how long you practice, it's how you practice. So for my classes, it's not just about practicing problems and trying to get as many right as you can. I have it set up specifically for mastery. So all students work on every assignment and work on the assignment until 100% of the questions are correct. Kind of with the idea that if I feel it's important enough to assign, then it's important enough for them to do and do well. The second pillar of my class is meaningful feedback, and that ties directly into the whole idea of deliberate practice, because if they're going to know whether or not they're doing something well, they need feedback to that effect. First part of that is that it must be timely. So my philosophy is that the students should get feedback as quickly as possible, and it should be substantive feedback. It can't just tell them, hey, good job. It should be more along the lines of, here's where you're making mistakes. They can get that feedback from me or from their peers or from the computer. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about strategies. So deliberate practice, meaningful feedback. They must have a clear vision and a clear goal for where they are heading. And again, that's just practical. And we'll talk about some of the ways we do that as well. And finally, my whole goal in math, as I'm sure it is for most people, is that they move from the little parlor tricks of math that many of us learned in math growing up to actually doing real math in the real world. And the activities that they do in the classroom need to reflect the fact that math exists all around them and has a real use and has real meaning to their lives.
So now that you have kind of a brief overview of why I do some of the things I do in my classroom and how it's kind of philosophically set up, I'd like to show some of the things we do in practical application, what that looks like in the day-to-day operations of the classroom.
So the first way we make this happen is to make sure that you have a learning management system that can allow you the time to provide feedback to your students and to meet with smaller groups. For me, one of the most important things is that flipped learning gets utilized, and it's not just flipping for the purpose of flipping. It's flipping so that I can spend more time with smaller groups of students in the classroom, helping them work toward that goal of mastery and helping them with their deliberate practice. For us at Upper St. Clair, that means we use the Blended Schools Network, but I know many districts use Moodle or Schoology. There's a lot of different options out there on the market. For blended schools, one thing I do in allowing students to work at their own pace is I have the video, as you can see here, for the lesson. The students have a note sheet, and then the assignment for them to do is located under that. So they can watch the video, take notes on it, and then use the examples in that to help them with just the basic concepts. In this case, just make some basic bar graphs and histograms. And then when they get that and they've kind of attempted that, what they do is they can click in Blended Schools or the Blackboard platform. They click this little button called Mark Reviewed, and that opens up the next lesson. So here, this is the line graphs and scatter plots. And then for this particular unit, what I did, once I had worked through these types of graphs, I gave them a chance to actually apply this by taking a survey of their classmates, analyzing the data, and creating graphs to display and make decisions about and make decisions and inferences about their own classmates. So that's again working from basic understanding of mathematical concepts to real world applications. So the question becomes, they're just doing this practice. How do you give them that meaningful feedback? Well, for me, I have a couple different attacks that I use. The first being digital. We use an application with we're a one-to-one iPad school. We use an application called Shobi, which is this fantastic. So what I do is, you can see this particular assignment is set up for May 16th to May 22nd, and students place whatever work they do for that week in that folder. Then when I click on a particular student's name, it shows all the work that they do, and then so you can see that for Grace here, she's working on chapter 9, whereas Dallas is working back on some geometry stuff. So different students can work on different things at their own time. And when I click on an assignment, I can go in and give them specific feedback on things they might be doing wrong. I might just do a little hint here, like at the bottom of Grace's study guide. She's got 3 factorial, and she just listed 3 when it should be 3 times 2 times 1. So I just a little note there to jog her memory. You can actually leave a voice recording on here. You can leave typed feedback. Shobi just offers a lot of really cool ways to provide feedback to students on the digital platform. Then students, as soon as I click done, the student is notified that I've made changes on this document. They can go in and revise and work toward that 100% mastery in that way. The other way I use feedback in the classroom is through personal connection as well, obviously. So while students are working at their own pace, that allows me to work with small groups. You see I have a group of 3 girls here. We're working on their project for probability, kind of talking through their calculations. But students can also work with their peers to get feedback as well. So while I work with one group, students can work together in teams, really builds a sense of camaraderie, working toward that common, clear vision and goal as well. So those are just some of the ways I provide feedback. But again, students need to understand where they are within the sequence of the course and where they're headed. Obviously, with the limitations of the school year, they need to know where they need to be. We can, give students a little bit more time, but at some point they definitely have to move forward, and that's kind of the balancing act we have to walk. But what I do to help students with this, and this is probably the part of my approach that's evolving the most, I give, for every unit we do, I give students a checklist of all the tasks that need completed and mastered, and all the learning targets for the skills that are involved here. So what the students do with this then is they mark it off with one color. They use the Notability app to download these and to do their work in. So say they submit an assignment to Shobi and they're waiting on my feedback. They don't know if it's mastered yet, so they'll color in the box with a yellow highlighter, and then once it's completely mastered, they can change that to blue or whatever color they choose. So it's a way for kids to take ownership and to understand exactly where they are in the timing of the course. The other thing I use is obviously the digital gradebook. We use MMS is our program. There's tons of different things out there. I'm sure that you personally have your own gradebook. But what I do, I kind of have to communicate with the kids in this. Since it's mastery based, I tell them, like for all these homework assignments, you see the quiz is all the way on the left where it says 9.5 to 9.8. So the assessment is all the way, but all the formative assessments, all those homework assignments for the kids, you're going to get a 1. It's my assignments are all worth either 0 points or 1 point. It is a 0 until we get to the point where you master it. So what I'll do with the gradebook, and I communicate with parents weekly about this as well, kind of where their kids should be, so I send out a weekly update. But they can check MMS, and if you start to see, one thing I tell parents is if you start to see missing assignments, that means your kid is, a day off the pace or 2 days off the pace. So Here you see, at the bottom of the grade book, you've got 3 kids who are right on track, and then you've got a handful of kids who are maybe a day behind or so. Not to really be concerned, but you might have some students who are a little bit further behind, who I have to work a little bit more closely with their parents to kind of work a plan out. So just using the grade book is another way to communicate, and making sure that parents are aware of how you use that. Regular updates have been a great strategy for me. I didn't put that in the PowerPoint here, but updating parents every week as to what you're doing in class with the majority of students on. I've had parents express to me over and over again how much they appreciate that, and I'm sure that's a practice that many of you use, but it's just one thing that I've found extremely helpful as well. This is how I keep track. So those are ways that I communicate with kids where they should be. For me, in order to manage where the students are, what I do is I just have I create an Excel spreadsheet that has little abbreviations for each assignment. And then as the students master it, I'll grade it in Shobi, and then I'll do like a split screen on my iPad, and then I'll just shade in when the student has mastered. I'll shade it in and I'll highlight it. And the cool thing about this is we don't have to have a specific quiz or test day. Kids can just take the assessment as they show mastery on the targets that lead up to that assessment. So here you have Eleanor, who's not quite ready for the quiz. She and Cosette are there. They've got one more assignment to do, whereas you have Carly at the top there, who's already finished out the chapter and on to the next chapter. So students can work at their own pace this way, and they're not tied to a specific quiz or test day. They just take the assessment as they're ready to take the assessment. And what this produces, the ultimate goal of this, is that all students reach the level of mastery, but then those who reach it quicker don't have to stop. They can go deeper, they can progress further, and ultimately every student is able to show growth, which is what we want for all of our kids. And really, the really true ultimate goal is not just quiz and test scores. For me, it's things like making sure everybody has multiple opportunities to master the content. I have some feedback that kids gave me in previous years that have been really, really encouraging and cool to see how this affects them personally. So I have kids who say things like, I learned through this how to achieve a goal that you set. It provides students the chance to increase responsibility. Kids say things like, I learned to be responsible for my work. And they learn to take ownership of their learning. And this was the coolest quote I got out of this survey last year. I had a student say, the way I learn can change and I can be good. Specifically, I guess, meaning I can be good at math. So just giving kids the chance to not just learn the math, but to learn about themselves and learn about themselves as learners. To me, that's the ultimate goal as a teacher first, and as a middle school teacher first, and as a math teacher second. If you have any questions, my contact information is here at the bottom of this slide. I'd be happy to help you in any way, provide you with any resources, any tips you need to get started that weren't covered in the video here. And I wish you the best of luck on your journey as you work toward customizing in your own classroom.